I'm Doug Boynton, and you're listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition, where we highlight the week's news and stories happening in our region. With just one more week to go for February, in this week's program, we look into how Virginia colleges and universities are going to miss their target for increasing the number of degrees they award. Also, Hampton Roads residents participated in nationwide days of action to protest President Donald Trump's actions.
He has fired thousands of federal workers. He has placed thousands of immigrants in jail in Gitmo.
And on the college sports front, Norfolk State is launching a new lacrosse program. WHRO reports on how that will open opportunities for that historically black university. It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. We start things off this week on an aquatic note. It seems a new blubbery showcase is available at the Virginia Aquarium, and WHRO's Catherine Hafner takes us behind the scenes of the aquarium's new tour of its harbor seals.
Tour guide Dorothy Schetzel is standing next to the aquarium's longtime outdoor seal display, discussing facts about the animals, like
these guys are going to be eating a wide variety of fish and squid.
When one of them decides to make an appearance and show off his swimming skills.
There we go. Hi, buddy. So this is Rudder. He's our middle guy. Hector is still up on the rock.
Then we move inside, where the seals are doing some training for physical and mental exercise. Schetzel says she hopes the behind-the-scenes look gives people a new appreciation for seals.
Not every day you get to see these animals up close and personal, so these tours really highlight their personalities.
The seal tours are available on Thursday mornings. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Transitioning now from the water to the state's higher education front, Virginia's College Administration Agency says the Commonwealth is going to fall short of an important goal. WHRO's Ryan Murphy reports on how it will not reach an increasing number of degrees awarded in Virginia.
Virginia legislators passed the Top Jobs Act in 2011 to expand enrollment and better retain students at Virginia's colleges and universities. Public schools were tasked with awarding an additional 100,000 undergraduate degrees beyond the growth the state was already on track for by 2025. The State Council of Higher Education for Virginia now says the state will miss that mark by about 19,000 degrees. The agency's report says associate degree awards fell and there was minimal growth in bachelor's degree awards over the last 15 years. The report also blames the COVID-19 pandemic for worsening those trends. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Up to James City County now, the storyline for Williamsburg's African American Heritage Trail was approved in December after years in the making. With more on how it came together, here's WHRO's Nick McNamara.
As we get up here, Scotland Street. So my church is right there, and it's across the street from the Triangle area, which was the center of black businesses. And I guess where folk met to talk politics.
Johnette Gordon Weaver walks through a leafy, grassy path that winds behind several homes, heading toward the historic First Baptist Church. The path will be the first leg of Williamsburg's African American Heritage Trail, beginning in Harris Bottom, named for Samuel Harris, the owner of Harris's Cheap Store. Harris died in 1904 and owned the land Gordon Weaver walks.
Sam Harris was totally the richest black man in town, but had enough money that when the college needed some funding, the college president went to him and asked him for money, and he lent them money. It became a displaced black community.
Gordon Weaver serves on the Trail Advisory Committee. Williamsburg identified the trail as a project in 2020. In 2023, the city convened input sessions to start homing in on where it should go and what stories it should tell. Williamsburg still needs an additional $1.8 million to complete construction.
The city felt one thing it was really good at, is infrastructure, actually building the trail. But the most important part was to work with the community on the narrative of the trail.
That's Assistant City Manager Michelle DeWitt. Williamsburg contracted with marketing agency JMI in 2024 to tie the narrative together, focusing on places and stories about notable people and moments shared by the Black community. 3 themes underpin the trail's storyline: strength derived from faith, power gained from education, and resilience built from community. City Council approved the storyline in December.
I kind of look at the trail as being an igniter I wanted to spark interest in the community so that the community would collectively come back and take ownership of their history.
That's Janice Canaday, Vice Chair of First Baptist Church's Board of Directors and Trail Advisory Committee member. The 2-mile ADA accessible trail will stretch through downtown, starting with a trailhead at Harris Bottom, across Lafayette Street from Williamsburg's Municipal Building. Signs will list other primarily black communities that were displaced and gentrified by the government and colonial Williamsburg over the years. A dozen sites will be featured along the trail. It includes Braxton Court, built by Robert Braxton, which housed black residents uprooted by colonial Williamsburg's restoration starting in the 1920s, and the Cook Building, built on the site that housed the city's first NAACP office and is named for businessman and civil rights leader Herbert Cook. It also reaches onto the campus of William and Mary to include the Sankofa Bird statue and Hearth Memorial to the enslaved. Canaday, though, says it's about more than any one location.
It's this whole vibrant community because we were dispersed like seeds, if you look at our history. And we've done things, we've created things, we've used our ingenuity throughout this town and community, and we've helped start other communities.
The history of Williamsburg's black community has long been unacclaimed, its stories or undertold, despite making up more than half of its population in the 18th and 19th centuries. Next to the names of white figures like George Washington, George Wythe, and James Blair, black Williamsburg-born people didn't see themselves reflected in the city's stories. Canaday hopes the trail can play a role in changing that for black residents today.
I want them to do that and in such a way and be so involved that generations that come under me, like my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, will never walk around like I did trying to find themselves in the story. They'll know their story.
Gordon Weaver agrees.
That's our responsibility, not to let it fall under that cement and get paved over like ever again.
Gordon Weaver and Canaday, though, stop short of calling it a centering of the African American experience. They say Williamsburg won't begin to start down that road until residents can access more historical documents and photos about the black community, and until black businesses can resurge in and around the Triangle area. Canaday says she plans to be one of those business owners and one day open a restaurant downtown.
Yeah, I want to honor all those women who were the backbone of making anything. Black women have been cooking up a nation forever, and I love feeding people, and I think through conversation and food and music that we can heal a nation and we can create a better community, and I want to be a part of that.
Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, the historic Aberdeen Gardens are threatened by flooding. A new major project, though, is hoping to turn the tide. But first, over to Portsmouth, where Rivers Casino seems to have settled in, generating steady income for the operators and for the city. WHRO's Barry Graham had that story.
Rivers Casino Portsmouth is generating just under $26 million in revenue each month and about $1.6 million each month as Portsmouth's share. In 2024, that meant more than $19.5 million in revenue for the city. Virginia's two other casinos are in the Hard Rock in Bristol and Caesars in Danville. The Danville Casino reported revenues of $28.5 million in its first full month of operation, the highest in the state. Danville is about an hour's drive from Greensboro and Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The Pamunkey Tribe's Norfolk Casino broke ground last week. The $750 million project will be built between the Amtrak station and Harbor Park. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
And back up to the peninsula, where Hampton's real estate values have quickly risen in the past 5 years. WHRO's Nick McNamara has some numbers.
Overall, the assessed value of properties in Hampton increased by more than $1 billion this year. Residential property values made up a large portion of that, rising by 7.7%, or more than $880 million. That far surpasses the 0.8% increase in multifamily housing values and 2.1% commercial property value increase. City Manager Mary Bunting says the rising values are part of a regional trend, with Hampton Roads being one of the 10 hottest real estate markets in the country.
Investors, home buyers are seeing our area as a very attractive area in which to invest.
Hampton has lowered property tax rates each of the last 3 years in response to rising assessments. Bunting says Hampton will consider that again in 2025 during budget discussions. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Black bear cubs that are orphaned in Virginia are brought to the Wildlife Center in Waynesboro, where they are raised by human surrogates until they can return to the wild. WMRA's Randy B. Hagee reported that story.
It's a cold afternoon in January. The Wildlife Center's Bear Mom team drives a utility vehicle up to the Black Bear Complex to toss in a meal of fruit and mixed nuts from the tower overlooking the enclosure. The team's 7 charges are 1-year-old black bears who came to the center last spring. They estimate the largest of them, nicknamed Double Green for the color of his ear tags, now weighs 200 pounds. At the peak of their winter bulking, rehab team lead Max Stewart says the group was eating about 200 pounds of food a day.
We get tons of donated produce from local grocery stores, and they can pretty much eat like any of the produce, the fruits and vegetables. We give them on a daily basis, and then we introduce a ton of proteins as well, like natural, like whole prey items like chick or mice or rats, fish, of course.
Rehab supervisor Alejandra Olvera explained that when very young cubs are first admitted to the center, the care team has to balance giving them enough socialization with not treating them like pets.
Cubs naturally are not solitary animals. They get a lot of parental care, and usually sows will have 1 to 2 cubs, maybe 3 cubs.
One big rule: no conversations around the cubs.
We try to diminish any human chatter, that's what we call it, because that's what we don't want them to get used to.
The center works closely with the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources on bear cases and determining when a baby bear really does need to be admitted. Double Green, the big boy we mentioned earlier, came in from Wythe County last March. 2 sets of siblings were brought in after their mothers were killed by cars, including 3 female cubs from Charlotte County. Olvera said there's a hierarchy within the 7, but this year's group is unique in how well they all get along.
This group specifically, it's very tight-knit. There's no separation within the 7.
The bears get a variety of natural and artificial enrichment items.
Lots of logs and branches, lots of fresh browse we'll cut daily. We gave them a bubble bath last year, so they were able to play and experience the foam and the bubbles, and that also helped them explore water. A bin that was full of leaves that we threw mealworms and other insects in and various food items.
2 of the cubs still needed to be bottle fed when they arrived. If you've ever bottle-fed a livestock animal, you know that ornery, lovable critter usually isn't as adapted to fend for itself as one raised by its animal mother. But for Double Green and Double Orange,
they're the ones who first started building their den.
These ursine adolescents will be released back to the wild this spring, just in time for this year's cub cohort to arrive. I'm Randy B. Hagee.
Residents in Hampton Roads are organizing protests and participating in nationwide days of action to push back against President Donald Trump. WHRO's Michelle Hankerson details the protesters' message.
Protesters rallied outside of U.S. Senator Tim Kaine's Virginia Beach office in early February. On Valentine's Day, another group gathered at U.S. Representative Jen Kagan's Virginia Beach office. Bill Johnson organized that rally.
On this Valentine's Day, our hearts are broken by what Trump is doing. He fired thousands of federal workers. He has placed thousands of immigrants in jail in Gitmo, and he's destroying many, many lives. We're just heartbroken for that. And Congresswoman Jen Kagan, she needs to stand up against Trump, and she needs to hold him accountable. She took an oath to defend the Constitution, both as an officer in the Navy and as a public servant.
President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, run by ex-owner Elon Musk, has fired federal workers from a number of agencies since Trump took office a month ago. Protests and rallies are planned across the country in response to the office's ongoing actions, as well as Trump's executive orders. Michelle Hankerson, WHRO News.
It's sort of like a trip to the body shop. The aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman is in port at Suda Bay, Greece, for repairs after last week's collision with a freighter in the Mediterranean. WHRO's Barry Graham brings us the latest.
The Navy says the damage includes external storage areas and a maintenance space, but the ship remains fully mission capable. A Navy team and local industry partners will assess and repair the damage. After the incident, the ship continued flight operations, and officials say the repairs will keep the carrier on its scheduled deployment. The Forward Deployed Regional Maintenance Center is leading the work with support from Norfolk Naval Shipyard. No injuries were reported in the collision, and an investigation is underway. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
A major new project in Hampton aims to protect the historic Aberdeen Gardens neighborhood from the growing threat of flooding. WHRO climate reporter Catherine Hafner visited the community to learn more.
It's a bright and clear morning in Aberdeen Gardens, and Margaret Wilson is slowly driving through her old stomping grounds.
Okay, this is the beginning of the original houses. That's the house I grew up on right there. So you're getting to see the neighborhood. This is the neighborhood.
Wilson is extremely proud of this community. She was born here in 1939 and now hosts tours explaining its rich and important history. That history is unique within Virginia and the entire country. Aberdeen Gardens was the first federal housing project under the Depression-era New Deal, built specifically for African American residents. Nearby Hampton University played a key role. As Wilson puts it,
it was built by blacks for blacks.
Aberdeen Gardens started with 158 homes, most of which are still standing. Black families grew food in their spacious backyards. Residents went on to become athletes, Medal of Honor recipients, and some of NASA's famous hidden figures. Now, the remaining residents are fighting to protect the neighborhood for future generations, protect it from flooding. Aberdeen always had flooding issues because of where it's positioned along Newmarket Creek. But things have gotten worse as climate change causes sea level rise and more intense rainstorms. Wilson says it's an existential threat.
It impacts the sale of the homes in this neighborhood, because if they find out there's flooding, they go to another neighborhood where it doesn't flood.
Scott Smith is coastal resilience engineer for the city of Hampton. He says the land around Aberdeen Gardens changed over time, losing grass and dirt that would usually help absorb water.
Over the last 90 years, there's been a lot more development around, which impacts the community.
The city studied flooding in Aberdeen Gardens and came up with more than 50 projects that could help. That includes widening century-old pipes to carry more water and restoring Aberdeen Creek. Meanwhile, the nonprofit Wetlands Watch was also working with the community through a program called the Collaboratory. Local students, including from Hampton University, spent time in Aberdeen Gardens to design a neighborhood-scale flood strategy. Director Mary Carson Stiff says Wetlands Watch committed to sticking with Aberdeen for the long haul, including getting money to actually do the work.
If resources aren't available and there isn't continuity of interest and continuity of engagement, the projects don't end up getting implemented. And that's a problem.
Last year, Aberdeen Gardens got what it needed to move forward. The EPA gave $20 million to Hampton and Wetlands Watch for the project. But that money comes from a program under President Biden's signature climate legislation. President Trump is now trying to freeze all funding from that law. Wilson says when she heard that Aberdeen's grant could be affected, she immediately thought about how some in the community might react to another broken government promise.
I could hear them say, there it goes again. Mm-hmm. Every time something is really good getting ready to happen, we start off doing something good and something takes it out of the way. My prayer is that it will continue.
Hampton says it will continue. The city's been told this funding won't be blocked. And if it is, officials say they'd start pursuing state resources. Shelton Tucker is president of the Greater Aberdeen Community Coalition and says they won't stop fighting to protect their home.
Aberdeen is definitely one of the jewels here. Really, it has historical value that's ancient as far as this country is concerned, and it's worth preserving.
Officials plan to complete the project over the next 3 years. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Norfolk State University is launching a new sports program, lacrosse. That program got an opportunity for professional exposure last weekend as it gets off the ground. The school's coach hopes it will open doors for the historically black university. WHRO's Nick McNamara fills us in.
Nice pass. Good look. Let's go. Ready. I got Ramaya.
Norfolk State University's women's lacrosse club is up early honing its skills at a Sunday scrimmage. The team is preparing for a trip to Springfield in Northern Virginia to participate in the Premier Lacrosse League's first HBCU All-Star game. Coach Rick Lanier says the game presents an opportunity for the team to network with players at other schools and draw new eyes to Norfolk State's young program.
Hopefully it gives us ground to grow. Once they see that we're growing in numbers, and we definitely had a huge following at the beginning of the year, let's see where we can take this. Could Norfolk State actually become a NCAA team? Anything's possible.
The HBCU All-Star Game showcases the Olympic style of lacrosse, also called sixes. As the name suggests, 6 players per team are fielded in the Olympic style, unlike traditional field lacrosse where 10 players are fielded. The game will be the first of the season for Norfolk State's women, which captain and psychology major Tori Stacy says makes the opportunity both exciting and nerve-wracking.
It really is. It's like an important game, so it's like, okay, serious game as the opener. I'm a little nervous, but I'll be okay once I get on the field.
Go, Tori, go, Tori, go! Get her! Bonnie.
Norfolk State is one of 8 HBCUs participating in the All-Star Game, joined by schools like Spelman College, Howard University, and Morehouse College. Lanier started coaching the men's club before taking the helm of the women's club, now in their 3rd and 2nd years respectively. While the men participated in the PLL's HBCU Invitational last year, it's the first opportunity for the university's women's club to step onto a stage of this size.
They're tapping into the HBCUs, recognizing that, this is something that definitely has legs, and we can run with it.
HBCUs make up a small but growing slice of the college lacrosse world. Despite its Native American roots, the sport has a reputation for being a predominantly white venture. That's been slowly changing, with more HBCUs founding school clubs or elevating their teams.
I was on my high school team for 3 years, and then I played club. And on both those teams, there was maybe 3 black girls. And I just feel like opening those doors and showing people that you can play these sports that we're usually not playing, it is pretty inspirational, and it really just does open a lot of doors and open a lot of minds.
That's Destiny Lee, a political science major and goaltender. The HBCU Lacrosse Consortium hosted its first All-Star Game in 2013. Hampton University became the first HBCU with a Division I men's team in 2016. The first to field a team was Morgan State in 1971, which contended with powerhouse schools, including defeating a Washington and Lee team that hadn't lost a regular season game in 2 years. Norfolk State hopes to reach those heights in time. The school plays in the Next Collegiate League, the first ever HBCU lacrosse league, founded in 2022. Kaya Minga, a health services management major and defender, has been playing since last year. She says it's been heartwarming to be a part of Norfolk State's program as it's getting established, and expects black women's prominence in the sport to continue to grow.
I feel like it's a possibility for black women to dominate any sport, and I feel like you don't know what you don't know. Once more people get introduced to the sport, there will be a lot of people out there that are very good at the sport.
Yeah! Good look. Good look.
Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
And you've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from WHRO's Catherine Hafner, Ryan Murphy, Nick McNamara, Barry Graham, and Michelle Hankerson. Also WMRA's Randy B. Hagee, and thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get your news updates at WHRO.org, the WHRO smartphone app, and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.